Okay, so we are going to dive into Act 1, Scene 1. And so Roman numeral number 1, and then for scene we do just lowercase I. And let me share my screen so you can see what it is that I just wrote. Okay, so I labeled this as Act 1, Scene 1. And if you want some anchor images just as you're listening to pull into, we're going to talk about the idea of the Rose and Montague being related to each other. And so remember the way that you remember this is that Juliet Capulet, Romeo is Montague, right? So Romeo ends in a vowel, Montague ends in a vowel, Juliet rhymes with Capulet, and that's how you remember it. Okay. Yeah. There also is the aspect of paradox that we're going to be taking a look at. So there's a bunch of different paradoxes towards the end of this particular scene: brawling love, loving hate, heavy lightness, a feather of lead, so on and so forth. So you can sort of glom onto the idea of the rose equaling Montague. You can also glom onto the idea of being in the present moment. And I'm using a stopwatch to kind of like signify the idea of being like in the moment as opposed to a clock or a calendar or something like that. There's going to be some violence and there's going to be a lot of talk about their swords. Just be aware, one more time, disclaimer, that Romeo and Juliet does have all sorts of references to sex. Mercutio's speech involves drugs. There's talk of inebriation. There is a suicide and there is a murder in this play. So this play is, is it still taught in middle school? Yes, but it is definitely got some heavy themes in there. So just be aware of that as we're going into it. Okay. So I'm going to stop this a lot just to kind of talk about the different motifs and how even in the opening part of the play, after we've done the work of the prologue and dissecting the prologue, after we've done the work of that, even in these opening scenes, we have a lot going on.
End of prologue. Act One of Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Act One, Scene 1. A public place. Enter Samson and Gregory, armed with swords and bucklers.
Gregory, on my word, will not carry coals.
No, for then we should be chollers.
I mean, an we be in collar, we'll draw.
Ay, while ye live, draw your neck out of the collar.
I strike quickly, being moved.
But thou art not quickly moved to strike.
A dog of the house of Montague moves me.
To move is to stir, and to be valiant is to stand. Therefore, if thou art moved, thou runn'st away.
A dog of that house shall move me to stand. I will take the wall of any man or maid of Montague's.
Okay, so we're going to pause it there just to give you some idea of what's going on here, right? So we have two servants, and they are servants for the house of Capulet. All right, so it's Samson and Gregory. And the way that I want you to think about these guys is I want you to imagine for a moment that we have given like a group of middle school boys a bunch of swords, and we're like, okay, here are your swords, middle school boys. You're going to go out into the street and I want you to be civil. Don't do anything bad with those swords. You better be good with those swords, right? So, like, these two guys are totally performing what middle school boys would do if they had access to a bunch of swords, right? They're sort of puffing themselves up and they're making these different jokes and like it's Shakespeare puns and he's trying to get the attention of the groundlings, right? And so he says things like, we are not going to be colliers or carry coals. And then he makes a joke about collar, which is this word, but also it sounds like this word. So the word collar is kind of like to be sick. He says we'll be in choler, meaning that we'll be sick, we'll be upset about it, and so we'll draw. And then when we draw, we will not be in a choler. We are free to do those things. Like we are free to like take our swords and like do whatever we want. I'm not gonna listen to this lady who's telling me not to carry my sword around and pick a fight. And then he says, in order to be a man, and this is going to be a repeated theme, especially in this particular scene, but throughout this play, in order to be a man, you need to fight. That is what men in this society do. Shakespeare is highlighting the fact that the performance of being a dude in this world where you're walking around carrying swords is to fight for what you believe in. And if you don't have access to fight a bear, although at the time they did have bear baiting, bear fights that was like part of like the entertainment that was actually competing with Shakespeare's own plays. If you weren't going to fight a bear in the wild, then what are you going to fight? Well, you're going to kind of make up fights, okay? And so we hear a dog of the house shall move me to stand. I will take the wall of any man or maid of Montague's. So even if we're talking about like take the wall isn't to fight with them, even if we're talking about the women of these different families, this is my gang. These are my people, and so I'm going to fight against them, right? Now, we're about to hear a very bawdy exchange between Samson and Gregory, in which they talk about pushing the Montagues' maids against the wall and quote unquote taking their maiden heads. I will let you figure out what that means for yourself, but just know if right now you're going, are they talking about? Yes, yes, they are talking about what you are thinking they are talking about, right? We'll stop at a second in a moment after this little scene where they go back and forth about thrusting maids to the wall and taking their maiden heads.
That shows thee a weak slave, for the weakest goes to the wall.
True, and therefore women, being the weaker vessels, are ever thrust to the wall. Therefore I will push Montague's men from the wall, and thrust his maids to the wall.
The quarrel is between our masters, and us their men.
'Tis all one. I will show myself a tyrant. When I have fought with the men, I will be cruel with the maids. I will cut off their heads.
The heads of the maids?
Ay, the heads of the maids, or their maiden heads. Take it in what sense thou wilt.
They must take it in sense that feel it.
Me they shall feel while I am able to stand, and 'tis known I am a pretty piece of flesh.
'Tis well thou art not fish. If thou hadst been poor John. Draw thy tool. Here comes two of the house of Montagues.
My naked weapon is out. Quarrel, I will back thee.
Oh my gosh. So it just keeps getting worse. And if right now you're like, is this appropriate? The answer is no, it's not appropriate. But remember, part of what Shakespeare was trying to do was to get all levels of the theater to pay attention. And the lowest level of the theater was the groundlings. And guess what the groundlings liked? They liked jokes that were puns, and they liked, the bawdy jokes about sex. And so, yes, when Samson says, my naked weapon is out after having a conversation with Gregory about like basically thrusting maids to the wall. Yes, Shakespeare's making fun of this idea that these are just basically like middle school kids going into the streets and being like, I'm a boy, I'm a boy, I'm a boy, right? And so, like, say whatever you want about gender, but in this very performative society, the construct of masculinity is something that Shakespeare's kind of making fun of. That, like, the only way that you can interact with each other is by interacting with each other violently, right? So it is basically that honor requires you to fight, right? It requires you to fight not only against another man, but also by stealing the virginity of that particular house's maids, right? The women of that particular household. Welcome, Romeo and Juliet.
How? Turn thy back and run?
Fear me not.
No, marry, I fear thee.
Let us take the law of our sides. Let them begin.
I will frown as I pass by, and let them take it as they list.
Nay, as they dare. I will bite my thumb at them, which is disgrace to them if they bear it.
Enter Abraham and Balthazar.
Do you bite your thumb at us, sir?
I do bite my thumb, sir.
Do you bite your thumb at us, sir?
Is the law of our side if I say aye?
No.
No, sir, I do not bite my thumb at you, sir, but I bite my thumb, sir.
Do you quarrel, sir?
Quarrel, sir? No, sir.
But if you do, sir, am for you. I serve as good a man as you.
No better.
Well, sir.
Say better. Here comes one of my master's kinsmen.
Yes, better, sir.
You lie.
Draw, if you be men.
Draw if you be men, right? So draw if you are a dude, right? So this is the idea of if you are honorable and you care about the house. And remember, these guys are servants. They're not even like physically, biologically related to the house of Montague or the house of Capulet. Okay. They are basically saying, listen, we have to fight because one, we're carrying swords and why wouldn't we fight? But two, in order to be a guy in this society, you have to be able to convert your passion to violence. And so that's another thing that I want you to kind of focus on is the idea of passion. And this is where we're going to get into the concept of the House of Montague being a rose. What do men do in this world of, Elizabethan society when they do feel passionate about something, right? If they're feeling passionate, then they need to do something with that emotion. They need a catharsis for this emotion. And the catharsis for these guys is basically to fight. We're going to get into a fight.
Gregory, remember thy swashing blow.
They fight. Enter Benvolio.
Part, fools! Put up your swords! You know not what you do!
Beats down their swords. Enter Tybalt.
What? Art thou drawn among these heartless hinds? Turn thee, Benvolio. Look upon thy death.
I do but keep the peace. Put up thy sword, or manage it to part these men with me.
What? Drawn and talk of peace? I hate the word, as I hate hell, all Montagues, and thee. Have at thee, coward.
They fight. Enter several of both houses, who join the fray. Then enter citizens with clubs.
Now remember, all of this is taking place like literally in the market square. This is the center of the city, okay? And we have two big players that just entered. So I want to make sure that we take a moment and we point these two big players out. The first one is Tybalt. So I'm going to label Tybalt as a T. And Tybalt is the anti-peace guy, right? So he says, peace, I hate the word. As I hate hell. So he really hates that word, peace. All Montagues. And thee. Who's thee? Benvolio. Why does he hate Benvolio so much? Because he views Benvolio as the opposite of what you're supposed to do if you are a noble man in this world. If you're a noble man in this world, you are not supposed to go around and tell people, don't fight, don't fight. That's not what noble men do. Noble men fight for what they believe in, right? So Tybalt shows up on the scene and he's like, peace, heck no, buddy. I'm going to get into this with you because that's what I'm supposed to do, okay? So the men in this world that we have encountered so far, except for one, Benvolio, are all about performing their identity of nobility and taking their passion, because that's what it is. Remember, the opposite of love isn't hate. The opposite of love is apathy. I don't care. I don't care. All of the people in the street hate, and that is passion. So they're taking their passion and they are funneling it into hate. All right. Benvolio, on the other hand, is taking his passion and he's funneling it into peace, which Tybalt sees as being like the opposite of masculinity. So he is like, absolutely not. I hate the word as I hate hell, Montague and thee. Have at thee, coward. And that starts a street brawl. Everybody's fighting now. Everybody's going at each other now.
Clubs, bills, and partisans, strike, beat them down. Down with the Capulets. Down with the Montagues.
Enter Capulet in his gown, and Lady Capulet.
What noise is this? Give me my long sword, ho!
A crutch, a crutch. Why call you for a sword?
My sword, I say. Old Montague is come, and flourishes his blade in spite of me.
Enter Montague and his lady Montague.
Thou villain, Capulet, hold me not, let me go.
Thou shalt not stir 1 foot to seek a foe.
Okay, so another sort of big group of players here. So hang on, let me grab my image. And I'm just going to add on to this a little bit more. Sorry. You get to see the background. What I do during class. This is what we do. Okay. All right, so now we have the two sets of parents, all right? So we have Lord Capulet and Lady Capulet. I'm just going to give her like a little. And then we have, by the way, if you're like, why is Benvolio blue if he's supposed to represent the Montagues? He is cousin to Romeo. So Tybalt is cousin to Juliet, and Benvolio is cousin to Romeo. Okay. So these two, basically the men are saying, I'm going to go out there and fight because that's my family. All right. And the women, they're the ones who are trying to kind of be the voice for reason, to the point that, like, literally Lady Capulet's like a crutch. Your sword is just a crutch because you can't use your big boy words and talk to someone like a big boy, right? You got to use your sword and be all masculine, right? And then Lady Montague is basically like, absolutely not. You sit there and you be quiet. Don't you get into it. Okay. Now, if right now you're like, that doesn't seem very 1600s of you, correct, right? But also in this moment, we have the figure of authority that kind of steps in, and that is Prince. Okay. So Prince is supposed to be the person who is like in charge of keeping the peace in this particular hamlet. He's like a little feudal lord. All right. By the way, Prince is also who Juliet is supposed to marry later on in the play, right? Okay.
Enter Prince with attendants.
Rebellious subjects, enemies to peace, profaners of this neighbour-stained steel. Will they not hear? What, ho, you men, you beasts, that quench the fire of your pernicious rage, with purple fountains issuing from your veins, on pain of torture from those bloody hands. Throw your mistempered weapons to the ground, and hear the sentence of your moved prince. 3 civil brawls, bred of an airy word, by thee, old Capulet and Montague, have thrice disturbed the quiet of our streets, and made Verona's ancient citizens cast by their grave beseeming ornaments, to wield old partisans in hands as old, cankered with peace, to part your cankered hate. If you ever disturb our streets again, your lives shall pay the forfeit of the peace. For this time all the rest depart away. You, Capulet, shall go along with me, and Montague, come you this afternoon, to know our farther pleasure in this case.
So the principal steps in, stops the fight in the middle of the hall of the middle school, and is like, you guys have been fighting for 3 times, just because you're saying stupid words to each other. I'm done. If this happens again, you are going to pay the forfeit of the peace with your life, meaning that someone's going to die. This needs to stop. You keep making these terrible mistakes, and I'm done with it. And so he says, you're going to come and talk to me later. you with me now, right? So again, kind of like the principal showing up and reprimanding these boys.
To old Freetown, our common judgment place. Once more, on pain of death, all men depart.
Exeunt Prince and attendants, Capulet, Lady Capulet, Tybalt, citizens, and servants.
Who set this ancient quarrel new abroach? Speak, nephew, were you by when it began?
Here were the servants of your adversary and yours close fighting ere I did approach. I drew to part them. In the instant came the fiery Tybalt with his sword prepared, which, as he breathed defiance to my ears, he swung about his head and cut the winds who, nothing hurt withal, hissed him in scorn. While we were interchanging thrusts and blows, came more and fought on part and part, till the prince came, who parted either part.
Oh, where is Romeo? Saw you him to-day? Right glad I am he was not at this fray.
Madam, an hour before the worshipped sun peered forth the golden window of the east, a troubled mind drave me to walk abroad, where, underneath the grove of sycamore that westward rooteth from the city's side, so early walking did I see your son. Towards him I made, but he was ware of me, and stole into the covert of the wood. I, measuring his affections by my own, that are most busied when they're most alone, pursued my humour, not pursuing his, and gladly shunned who gladly fled from me.
Many a morning hath he there been seen, with tears augmenting the fresh morning's dew, adding to clouds more clouds with his deep sighs. But all so soon as the all-cheering sun should in the farthest east begin to draw the shady curtains from Aurora's bed, away from light steals home my heavy son, and private in his chamber pens himself, shuts up his windows, locks fair daylight out, and makes himself an artificial night. Black and portentous must this humour prove, unless good counsel may the cause remove.
Okay, so now we hear what's going on with Romeo. Basically, his mom's like, oh my gosh, where's Romeo? Was he in this fight? Thank goodness he wasn't in this fight. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad, right? And so Benvolio's like, yeah, you know what? Honestly, I saw Romeo kind of skulking around the forest, and then I went to go like talk to him because he's my cousin. And I was like, well, gonna be like, what's up, cuz? And he basically ran from me. So I'm not gonna go chase him in the woods. If he doesn't want to hang out with me, he doesn't want to hang out with me. And to that, his father, Romeo's father, Lord Montague, says, nephew, I have seen him basically decide to be sad. Romeo is choosing to shut light out. He creates an artificial night. He goes into his chamber and pens himself, meaning that he's like writing in his journal. And so, like, this is kind of mean, but I always kind of pictured Romeo as being kind of like the emo boy of this family. Like, the Montague family, just in general, they are about the idea of kind of like living in the moment, definitely, but also Romeo to an utmost extent, which means that when you're sad, when you're depressed about something, that means that you feel that depression deeply, right? You live in that state of depression. And he, instead of like going outside when the sun starts to rise, he goes into his room and shuts the curtains. And like, I kind of just imagine he like turns on the Cure and starts like writing in his journal, and like his bangs are in his face, and like he's just like, no one understands me, right? And so like that's what I kind of picture, and like that's kind of a mean dismissal of Romeo, but also that's kind of what he's doing, is he's purposefully feeling his emotions. Remember, this is about what we do with passion, and Romeo is feeling passion, and part of passion is darkness. When something isn't what you thought it was, or doesn't turn out the way that you thought, especially if you are passionate about it, you're going to feel that deeply, and that's what Romeo is doing. But his parents are a little frustrated with him about this. They're like, come on, man, I hope that you snap out of this, right? So basically his dad's like, hey, I need you to go talk to Romeo because he's being a little bit too dramatic right now, and he's being a little bit too emotional. Please, like, give him some good counsel, cousin of Romeo, my nephew, Benvolio.
My noble uncle, do you know the cause?
I neither know it, nor can learn of him.
Have you importuned him by any means?
Both by myself and many other friends. But he, his own affection's counsellor, is to himself, I will not say how true, but to himself so secret and so close, so far from sounding and discovery, as is the bud bit with an envious worm, ere he can spread his sweet leaves to the air, or dedicate his beauty to the sun.
Okay, so this comparison between Romeo and a rose is very important. And for those of you that were with me for the Gatsby class, remember we talked about the idea of he's a rose, he's an absolute rose. A rose, when you encounter something that's blooming, and we're just going to do a quick little, hang on, let me save this. Yeah. So we're going to do a quick little lesson on symbolism. This is one of my favorite things to do with kids. Okay, when I say the word love, what's the first image that pops into your head? All right. Now, if we've been talking about roses, so maybe you're thinking of roses, but the majority of people will say this, right? This is a heart. When I think of love, this is what I think of. All right. I want you to think also about the idea of a rose being a symbol for love. Okay. What's the difference between a heart, especially this shape of a heart? Notice that it's not like an anatomical heart, and a rose. Well, this is just kind of like a flat image. It's something that we see around Valentine's Day or like, I heart dogs or whatever it is that we heart. But this doesn't really carry any true passion with it. A rose can do the same thing that love can do. A rose can bloom, it can bud, it can die, it can grow wild, it can be neglected, it can, create other little roses, right? And so it does all of the things that love does. It has thorns, it can hurt you. There's different types of love, just like there's different types of roses. They can be unexpected. They can also be planted, like you can like plant them and cultivate them, just like you can cultivate love, right? So like this idea of love being a rose is also the idea of living in the moment, right? If you encounter a rose, you experience that rose. And that also kind of goes to the idea of Shakespeare's fascination with the concept of a play, because the story that we're looking at is something that the people in the audience would already know. It's a pretty famous story, and Shakespeare's just kind of doing a remake of it. So knowing that this particular story, just like the idea of love, already exists in their mind, how is he going to pull his audience into the moment of experiencing what Romeo is experiencing what Tybalt and Juliet and Benvolio and Mercutio are experiencing? That experience of love means that the consequence of love, oh my gosh, where did I put it? Oh, it's everywhere in here. Hang on. There it is. I got too many files. That experience of love is going to be a very important aspect for these characters, especially Romeo. He's all about the now, living in the now. And that impulsivity is also a form of impetuousness, right? And that's part of the problem that happens in this play. Young love is impetuous and impulsive.
Could we but learn from whence his sorrows grow, we would as willingly give cure as know.
See where he comes. So please you step aside. I'll know his grievance, or be much denied.
I would thou wert so happy by thy stay to hear true shrift. Come, madam, let's away.
Exeunt Montague and Lady. Enter Romeo.
Good morrow, cousin.
Is the day so young?
But new struck 9.
Ay me, sad hours seem long. Was that my father that went hence so fast?
It was. What sadness lengthens Romeo's hours?
Not having that which, having, makes them short.
In love?
Out.
Of love?
Out of her favour, where I am in love.
Alas, that love so gentle in his view should be so tyrannous and rough in proof.
Alas, that love, whose view is muffled still, should without eyes see pathways to his will. Where shall we dine? Oh me, what fray was here? Yet tell me not, for I've heard it all. Here's much to do.
Okay, so I love this, and I'm going to let him go in just a second here. Romeo's all mixed up, right? So basically, Benvolio's like, "Hey, bud, what's going on?" And Romeo's like, "Oh, is it so late in the afternoon? I've been so sad." And Benvolio's like, "Oh, okay, why? Why are you so sad? Why does it make sad hours long?" And he's like, "I was in love." And he's like, "You're not in love anymore?" And he's like, "I'm out of love, out of her favor," right? He's about to talk about Rosalind, his first girlfriend. And so Benvolio is like, "Oh no." And so like I've sort of represented it by all these little symbols symbols down here, but we're about to hear him go through a series of paradoxes. And these paradoxes are supposed to represent his mixed up understanding of love. So remember, we talked about the idea of passion. Here's the problem with passion. Passion is wonderful, but also passion can equal madness. Because if you get too passionate about something, then you fall down into a tunnel of like making poor choices. And unfortunately, Romeo has a tendency to fall in love and out of love very quickly, as we will see through this particular play, right? So, what are the options for Romeo in his society? Well, he can either be super passionate and basically fight everyone, right? Or he can be super passionate and be in love, which can also lead to a bit of a madness. And that's why his dad's kind of like, he stop locking yourself up in writing in your emo journal, like turn off the cure and put the black eyeliner away, right? So he's like yelling at him, like not actually yelling at him, but he's basically thinking that like my son needs to snap out of it. But Romeo is living in this perpetual state of nowness, and that nowness includes the sadness that kind of makes him a little bit crazy. So he talks about brawling love. And although that doesn't seem to make any sense, if you think about it, brawling love is what these guys are doing. They love their families so much that they are fighting for the honor of it. Loving hate. So I hate the feeling of being in love because it hurts my heart. I'm heavy because the lightness of love has made me feel so heavy because it's gone, right? So feather of lead because, love is supposed to be the wings that help you fly, but now those wings are leaden because Rosaline doesn't love me. Okay, so all of these little paradoxes are going to be an example of basically Romeo's kind of like mixed up madness that is causing him to feel this way. And poor Benvolio's like, oh my gosh, I gotta snap him out of this.
Do with hate, but more with love. Why then, O brawling love, O loving hate, O anything of nothing first create? O heavy lightness, serious vanity, misshapen chaos of well-seeming forms, feather of lead, bright smoke, cold fire, sick health, still waking sleep. That is not what it is. This love feel I, that feel no love in this. Dost thou not laugh?
No, coz I rather weep.
Good heart, at what?
At thy good heart's oppression.
Why, such is love's transgression. Griefs of mine own lie heavy in my breast, which thou wilt propagate to have it pressed with more of thine. This love that thou hast shown doth add more grief to too much of mine own. Love is a smoke raised with the fume of sighs, being purged, a fire sparkling in lovers' eyes, being vexed, a sea nourished with lovers' tears. What is it else? A madness most discreet, a choking gall and a preserving sweet. Farewell, my coz.
Going.
Soft, I will go along, and if you leave me so, you do me wrong.
Tut, I have lost myself, I am not here, this is not Romeo, he's some other where.
Tell me, in sadness, who is that you love?
What, shall I groan and tell thee?
Groan? Why no, but sadly tell me who.
Bid a sick man in sadness make his will. Ah, word ill urged to one that is so ill. In sadness, cousin, I do love a woman.
I aimed so near when I supposed you loved.
A right good markman, and she's fair, I love.
A right fair mark, fair coz, is soonest hit.
Well, in that hit you miss. She'll not be hit with Cupid's arrow. She hath Dian's wit, and in strong proof of chastity well armed, from love's weak childish bow she lives unharmed. She'll not stay the siege of loving terms, nor bide th' encounter of assailing eyes, nor ope her lap to saints seducing gold. Oh, she's rich in beauty, only poor that when she dies, with beauty dies her store.
Then she hath sworn that she will still live chaste?
She hath.
Oh, poor Romeo. So he's in love with Rosaline and he asked her out and she's like, "No, I'm gonna become a nun." So he's like super in love with this chick, and she's basically like, I don't know. It's very nice, Romeo. Thank you, but no thank you. And so she's rejected him. And Romeo just like can't handle it. And he's like, no, she's so pretty. She's so beautiful. I can't handle it. And so he's sort of sitting there and moping about this. And we're about to hear Benvolio basically suggest to Romeo, "Hey, bud, why don't you go check out some other chicks if like you're in love with her because like of her beauty?" To which he's kind of replying, "Oh, she's also very smart," right? So he does kind of like the idea of her being smart. But remember, Romeo is supposed to kind of represent the other side of this like passion in the world in which Shakespeare is setting this play. Part of this play is to say the world in which this type of love takes place is toxic. That's why at the beginning of the play, the whole chorus, the prologue says it is only through the death of the children that the grudge between these two families ends, right? And so like we have to kill the children, right? So the children, one of the children here is Romeo, and he is a manifestation of the passion of love that has taken him to the passion of madness. But the passion that exists otherwise that we have seen thus far in Act 1 Scene 1 is also very deadly, right? So like passion is deadly in this world. And so what do we do with that? How do we handle that? Okay, so hang on. Let's finish it up. Benvolio is about to be like, "You need to go check out some other chicks."
And in that sparing makes huge waste for beauty, starved with her severity, cuts beauty off from all posterity. She's too fair, too wise, wisely too fair, to merit bliss by making me despair. She hath forsworn to love, and in that vow do I live dead that live to tell it now.
Be ruled by me. Forget to think of her.
Oh, teach me how I should forget to think.
By giving liberty unto thine eyes, examine other beauties.
'Tis the way to call hers exquisite in question more. These happy masks that kiss fair ladies' brows, being black, puts us in mind they hide the fair. He that is strucken blind cannot forget the precious treasure of his eyesight lost. Show me a mistress that is passing fair. What doth her beauty serve but as a note where I may read who passed that passing fair? Farewell. Thou canst not teach me to forget.
I'll pay that doctrine, or else die in debt.
No, sweet Benvolio. So Benvolio is basically like, I know that you think she's the most beautiful girl that's ever existed in the whole world, and I totally get it, but buddy, come on. Give me a chance and let me find someone who's just as pretty. To which Romeo kind of says, I don't think that you understand that it's not just her beauty, it's also her wit and her wisdom and all of those things. And I have looked into the sun. So one of the other aspects of this is the idea of light and dark. Romeo is in the darkness and he says, the light is my love for Rosaline, right? We're going to hear this again in other acts and scenes in which he compares the concept of being in love with someone as to being in the light of God. And that, friends, is very, very dangerous in a Shakespearean play. Don't ever say that it's going to be like God, because guess who's God in a Shakespearean play? Shakespeare. And he's going to take you down. And that's what happens, right? So our first encounter with Romeo is basically him being in darkness because Rosaline's like, "Hey, you're a nice guy, but I think I'm going to go to a nunnery. Thanks so much. Bye." And he's like, "No." And he just sort of like, just collapses into himself for all of that. Okay, so we'll do the next one, Act 1, Scene 1, and we're just going to keep going with this.